Now, this week marks 1 year since Israeli strikes on Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza's Khan Yunis, which killed 22 people, including 5 journalists. A soldier has come forward with testimony written about in worldwide media. His account describes how the Israeli army responds when its actions on the ground could be perceived as war crimes. He also alleges that the IDF pulls out all stops to link strike victims to Hamas after the strikes have already taken place. Well, joining us now is Nadav Weiman, Executive Director of Breaking the Silence. It's an NGO of veteran Israeli soldiers who publicly expose Israeli military service and life in the occupied Palestinian territories. Nadav, thank you very much for joining us. So, Nadav, what typically would you say pushes an Israeli soldier to break the silence, and in this case, 1 year later?
I'll say that from the beginning of this war on October 7, 2023, almost 200 soldiers that fought in Gaza joined the ranks of Breaking the Silence, broke their silence, and spoke about what it was sent to do over there. And I've got to say that in this case, the difference between what we were told as Israelis about what the IDF is doing, how we're protecting Israel, fighting Hamas, releasing our hostages, and what that soldier had to do to continue this war for quote-unquote legitimization from the international community after we killed journalists and aid workers.
And how does your organization, when they receive a testimony, verify it, given that they often can't be independently confirmed?
Yeah, so first of all, we exist for the last 22 years. We have more than 1,600 testifiers from all of the different units that served in the IDF. And we know a lot about what's going on inside the IDF. So we have our own database, there is a lot of international media, and of course, people on the ground that can assist us. Believe me, when we publish a testimony is after we are perfectly certain that is true and the testifier is speaking truth to power.
And this IDF soldier, in his testimony, described retrospective incrimination as one of the steps taken by the Israeli army after strikes. Could you briefly explain to us what is retrospective incrimination and walk us through the process?
So in cases like this, Nasser Hospital, or the 15 paramedics that were killed by IDF soldiers in Rafah, or airstrikes that are killing 3-digit numbers of civilians in Gaza, suddenly the IDF spokesperson in the State of Israel need to explain to the international community what we did over there, who are the targets for the attack. And that's why I said legitimization before, because the IDF and the State of Israel wants international legitimization to do what we are doing in Gaza. So the names of the people that were attacked and killed were taken by the intelligence corps and the IDF. And then the IDF starts to look for evidence. He was near a building that was identified as a Hamas building, or he has, a family member that is linked to Hamas or jihadic Islam, or he was on the payroll when he was 16, or I don't know. There's a lot of things. And then the IDF tried to build a case around certain individuals to say, we attacked because there were Hamas members over there. Now, I don't think that the tank that fired the tank shells at the hospital had a booklet with 25,000 Hamas members, and they looked photo after photo and said, there are Hamas members over there. This is something that we do after we shoot. First we shoot, we kill, and then we think, and then we try to find a reason why it happened. And in this case, it's so outrageous because the double tap attack, the second tank shell killed the majority of the people over there. So I don't know how the IDF can even explain it that we knew who were killing, who were shooting at.
And would you say that this kind of IDF practice, does it show up in other cases, or was Nasser Hospital an isolated case?
No, it shows up in other cases, but I can take a couple of years ago when there was the right of return marches on the border in Gaza in 2018, when IDF snipers and sharpshooter killed more than 200 Palestinians. Back then it was the same. On the evening news in Israel, it was, we killed this and that amount of terrorists. And that's the thing. We have testimonies from this war in Gaza that soldiers are telling us that if we shot and killed someone, he would be listed as a terrorist. an operation officer from one of the main battalions that fought in Gaza told us that every night he had to count all of the numbers of the Palestinians they shot at and listed all of them as terrorists. Doesn't matter if they're civilian or not, because that's the assumption in the IDF, right? If they are what the IDF calls military age male, which is very vague, maybe 16, maybe 17, maybe 75, if we shoot at him, it's perfectly legitimate to shoot at them because they are a threat to our forces. So again, counting terrorists by the IDF is not what me and you would consider combatants on the battlefield.
And the IDF said it had opened an internal investigation into Nasser Hospital, and it's still open a year on. To your knowledge, how many such investigations actually lead to charges or discipline?
Almost none, because those investigations, at the end of the day, they don't investigate who gave the command. They don't investigate who authorized the rules of engagement. They don't investigate who authorized a number of civilians that can be killed with the target, what the IDF calls collateral damage. It will only look down. And as we know from the past, those investigations, maybe they would find a low-ranking officer and blame him, and that's it. But the thing is that we need to investigate the policy. That's what needs to be investigated. And that's something that the IDF cannot investigate. Because a situation like this, where it is out in the world and it's outside of regulation, it is wrong, obviously. But the problem is what the state of Israel and the IDF sees as legitimate, as okay commands, as kosher commands. And those are the places that we want investigation.
And we know that over 200 Palestinian journalists have also been killed as a result of strikes since Israel's war on Hamas. Do you have any testimonies suggesting that journalists are military targets as policy and not just killed incidentally in these strikes?
I can say it from the other way around. We asked every soldier that gave us testimony what were the rules of engagement. And they told us if it's a neighborhood that the IDF threw leaflets from the air and sent text messages for Palestinians to go away, so every man, military age, shoot to kill, which is 180 degrees the rules of engagement, right? You're supposed to shoot only in as the last resort, not as the first step. But we also asked the soldiers, what else you're not allowed to shoot at? And they told us there isn't any word about don't shoot at paramedics, don't shoot at journalists, and don't shoot at our hostages. And as a soldier, if you don't hear it in the briefing, you understand that this is like a gray area, something vague, maybe you can do that, right? If it's very specifically weren't told to soldiers, so it means a lot about how the IDF sees journalists and paramedics inside Gaza.
And your NGO, so Breaking the Silence, has existed since 2004. How is Breaking the Silence perceived in Israel today? Has the perception of your NGO shifted since October 2023?
I've got to say that, for Israelis, it's hard to hear bad things about their next door neighbors or their cousins or their brothers or their wife, I don't know. But we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and tell ourselves this is what we are doing, right? I served in the IDF, I fought in Gaza in 2008, and I'm speaking to my society about what we are sending our kids to do, because Israelis, and I know it sounds weird, they don't really know how Gaza looks like from the inside, or the West Bank, or they don't know what IDF commands our soldiers to do, really. And this is something that in a democracy, we need to speak about it. And I've got to say that after October 7th, we thought there would be a problem, right? Israelis don't want to speak with us. But the numbers are going up. More people comes to the South Hebron Hills and Hebron to see settler violence. And more people invite us to do our Gaza lecture. And more soldiers are coming and joining our ranks and breaking their silence. Because what is happening in the last 2.5 years in our region by the state of Israel, by the IDF, is something that every Israeli that believes in democracy and equality could not stand on the side. We have to do something against it. So more and more people joining, more and more people want to hear from us.
Thank you very much, Nadav. That's all we have time for today. That was Nadav Weiman, Executive Director of the NGO Breaking the Silence. Thank you.